Good morning. Good morning. This is RCB News, and I am Ryan Bowling. First, I want to come off right now before I begin this. The subject of this video is to commemorate and honor the lost on this solemn day, as we know as 9/11. We know this is the event that took place when the two planes crashed into the World Trade Center, and according to sources, took over 3,000, maybe 2,000, 3,000 lives. But not only people inside the building, but also police officers and firefighters. So we want to recognize and honor them for their services. My heart goes out to the families of the lost ones. My prayers are for you and for your strength and for your edification. So I want to recognize you guys and salute you guys and honor you and honor our fallen soldiers, our fallen men and women and police officers and firefighters who lost their lives to save other people. I honor you and I salute you. And to the families, once again, of the lost loved ones, my prayers are for you. I pray that you will gain strength through this situation and find some resolve. God bless you all. But I want to get right down to the subject at hand. And the other day, it was almost like a revelation, almost like a kind of like God himself came to me and showed me something that just kind of blew me away about black people's continuous support for the Democratic Party. We all know that the Democratic Party is the original party of slavery. We all know that. It shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be something that would knock somebody off their feet. We all know that the Democratic Party is the original party of slavery. But there's something that really caught my attention the other day as I was thinking about this. During slavery in the Deep South among blacks hated slavery. They put up with it, but they hated it. They endured it, but they hated it. They would sing their spiritual songs in the midst of the slavery, but they hated it. They hated slavery to such an extent back in those days that many of them revolted and rebelled and tried to escape, even at the expense of their own lives. So blacks at the time hated slavery, but something really grabbed my attention. Blacks today in modern America have gotten to the point that they do not hate their slavery. They love their slavery. Now you're probably saying, what do I mean by that? The epiphany that came to me was this. I asked myself a question. Why is it so hard to get blacks out of the Democratic Party? Why is it hard to get blacks to transition from the Democrats to the Republicans? Or at least transition just out of the Democratic Party and stay out of it, period. Even if they don't decide to vote Republican, why is it so hard? Statistically, 90% of blacks vote for the Democratic Party. Now, prior to that time, back in the early history of America, when blacks were set free, and during the early 1900s, over 70 to 80, perhaps according to some sources, 90% of blacks voted Republican. Why? Because it was the Republican Party that fought for their freedoms. But there was a breach that took place, and I don't have time to get into it in this video, that may be a future video, where blacks began to slowly progress over or slide over to the Democratic Party. But that's another video by itself. Down through the decades, it has been increasingly difficult to get blacks to leave the Democratic Party en masse. Now, why is that? Because the revelation that came to me was this, that they love their slavery. There's a difference between hating your slavery, obviously, and loving your slavery. But if they love their slavery, then the question has to, in modern day times, then the question has to be, what kind of slavery are they in today? I submit to you that the slavery that the Democratic Party has proposed upon blacks in America today is an economic slavery and a handout slavery. blacks have become enslaved to the government. Not all blacks, obviously, but millions of blacks, 90% of them have become pawns of the democratic government and have become slaves to it. But not only are they slaves, but they love their slavery. If someone is constantly giving you something for free, giving you money, giving you subsidized housing, giving you this, giving you that, and you're constantly receiving it, constantly receiving it, constantly receiving it over the course of years, you're going to begin to develop a dependency upon that which they are giving you. And eventually you're going to grow to love it. We got to understand, and I hope I don't sound like I'm preaching here, but slavery is an oppressive situation, regardless of how you look at it, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's economic. It's an oppressive situation. You have no power over your own destiny. You have no power over your thoughts. You have no power over your emotions. You have no power over your decisions. You are locked and chained by the system of slavery, whether it's a physical system of slavery or whether it's an emotional or financial system of slavery. And I submit that blacks today have been locked and chained by the Democratic Party in economics and handouts. But they have grown to love their slavery, which explains why it is so hard to get them to leave the modern plantation, which is known by many critics and many researchers as an urban plantation. See, what the Democrats simply did, they simply transferred it from the rural plantation of physical slavery and working in the cotton fields to the urban plantation of dependency on the government. Now, that may be a strong assertion. I know that's a strong assertion. It's a strong claim. But this is my opinion based on my own studies and own observations. And I've had struggles with black people who have become enslaved by the Democratic Party economically and emotionally and mentally. Now, I want to share something with you that really backs up my assertion. I had purchased a book back in 2015, and I think I've shown this book before in a previous video, written by a pastor by the name of Paul McGuire. Now, I'm going to show you guys this book. This book is really tattered up. My apologies for this book. Please don't be like, oh, I'm going to turn off this guy. My apologies, but clearly I've been reading this book a lot, because when I read this book back in 2015, I purchased the book back in 2015, began to read this book, it blew me away. Blew me away. There is a section in this book that ties in to this idea of slavery, modern slavery. And when I read this section in this book, back in 2015, I wasn't thinking about any form of slavery in reference to black people. But when I began to think about blacks' enslavement to the Democratic Party in today's society, this particular quote from this particular individual in this book sparked a light bulb in my mind. I said, oh, wait a minute here. Wait a minute. This makes sense now. It seems to tie together. So I want to read a portion out of this book that the author of this book, Mass Awakening, is quoting the actual words of a man by the name of Aldous Huxley. And Aldous Huxley was a scientist from Great Britain and a part of the intellectual elite and a scientist from Great Britain. He came here to America in the 1930s, but in order to spread, according to this researcher, in order to spread the drug mescaline, or mescaline, I believe that's how you pronounce it. But that's another story. In 1952, according to the writer Paul McGuire in his book, in 1952, Aldous Huxley, this scientist, was given a speech at the University of Berkeley on March 20th, 1962. So this was decades ago. So he was given a speech at the University of Berkeley in 1962 to a group of neuroscientists and scientists. And these were his words. He says, there will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude. Now, I want you to hear this part right here. A pharmacological method of making people love their servitude. Clearly, Aldous Huxley, in giving this speech, is talking about what? Drugs. And then he goes on to say, and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak. Producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies. So in other words, he's talking about producing dictatorship without tears. And when we think about dictatorship, what comes to your mind? Adolf Hitler, Stalin, all these dictators, these horrible, brutal dictators who use force to subjugate their subjects, to subjugate them, to enslave them, to oppress them. They use physical force to do so. Here, Aldous Huxley is referring to the concept of drugs, which basically numbs the senses and numbs the resistance of the person in order to be able to manipulate the person psychologically and mentally into a form of slavery. So he's used the term producing dictatorship without tears. In other words, producing a dictatorship without pain. This will be a dictatorship of the mind, not physical, but of the mind. He says, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies. So here, Aldous Huxley is not talking about just black people or white people. He's talking about entire societies. But I wanted to read this particular quote from this scientist because this is particularly painful, in my opinion, when it comes to, and when it's in reference to black people. Because black people have fallen in love with their slavery towards the Democratic Party. He goes on to say, so that people will in fact have their liberties or freedoms taken away from them, but will rather, watch this, enjoy it. They're having their freedoms taken from, so black people, I'm taking this passage here and applying it specifically to black people the way I see it. So a vast majority of black people who are indebted to the Democratic Party are having their liberties taken from them by the Democratic Party politicians, and by their legislation, and by their laws, and with their handouts. Black people are having their liberties and freedoms taken from them, and they enjoy it. They enjoy it, and they don't even realize it. Aldous Huxley goes on to say, so he says, but they will rather enjoy it because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing. So imagine that. Propaganda, they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing. So what do the Democrats in general do every 4 years? They spit out propaganda after propaganda after propaganda towards black people. And it works every single time. And then Aldous Huxley goes on to say, or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution. So there you go. The reason I believe that it is very difficult, if not almost impossible, to get blacks off of the modern plantation of the Democratic Party, that urban plantation, is because they have fallen in love with their slavery. Many of them are on drugs. Not all of them, but a lot of them are taking some kind of drugs, taking some kind of substance that basically subjugates the mind and subjugates the passions. And it's easier to control a person when they're strung out on drugs, or they're alcoholic, or they're overwhelmed with sensual desire. It's easy to control them. It's easy to control them. And what I submit to you is that the Democratic Party, not all of them, but a vast majority of these Democrats have subjugated blacks by using these means to control their minds and their perception. It's basically brainwashing. It's mind control. Every 4 years, they use the same propaganda against blacks, and because blacks in general that are hooked onto the government love their slavery, when it comes time to vote, they automatically vote for the Democrats. So to sum this up, what is the solution? What solution do we come up with? The solution is deprogramming. The solution, in my opinion, is faithful, patient deprogramming. But not only faithful deprogramming, the other part of that is, listen, if they don't want to listen to you, if they don't want to submit to any information that you want to give them that's going to help them, then leave them alone. People who fall in love with slavery and you try to give them the key to get out of slavery and they refuse to accept the key, don't keep trying to offer them the key. Leave them alone. If they want to be slaves, let them be slaves. You've tried to offer them the freedom and they want to be slaves, let them be slaves. That's all I can say about that. But my word is this, man. We just got to continue as conservatives to continue to tell people, listen, man, the conservative way is the best way to go. And if you're an African American voting for the Democrats, my job and my responsibility in part is to help you see what they're doing. They have not helped you in any way. It's time to come up out of the present day modern urban plantation. It's time to come up. It's time to come up. God bless you all. If you like this video, press the like button. Make your comments, share this video, and subscribe. God bless you all, and see you again on RCB News.